Hi, hello, and welcome to the Tax Files. My name is Ali Kazmi, and I'm delighted to be joined today by my co-host, Ekta. Good morning, Ekta.
Good morning, Ali. Welcome again to the Tax Files, a monthly audio podcast where, alongside an esteemed guest, we'll be discussing the most pertinent topics for tax and accounting professionals, while also getting to know some key members of the tax industry a little bit better. Ali, how have you been?
Well, it's all happening at the Kazmi household. I have actually been traveling quite a bit, managed to be in Dubai and in Morocco the last month. And if I may add, for work, this week I attended my daughter's graduation. And even though she graduated 2 years ago, it was an emotional time for me.
Oh,
Now, tell me, Ekta, how have you been keeping?
I think good. God, I've been surviving this heat wave that we've been getting in the UK over the course of the last week. Who would have thought 45 degrees in kind of central London? Absolutely crazy, right?
Sweltering.
I know, it's crazy. And you know what they were saying? People are still sort of sitting around saying global warming isn't a thing, and it's all a complete like mythological, stop making things up. It's just crazy. I think if we ever needed a sign to start doing our bit, I think that probably is it, right?
Well, you know my green credentials. I'm really actually, we needed a kick up the rear to bring us to your
Exactly.
senses. And I think you've had that.
Exactly. And I think this is reticent, right? I think it's one of those things where you can't turn a blind eye to kind of getting off the tube and sort of getting hit by hot weather at 42 degrees and all the rest of it. So for anyone that's still denying it, I think this is the kind of thing that should wake everybody up. Fingers crossed.
Really.
Well, look, today is the fifth episode of the Tax Files, where we're joined by Simon York, the Director of Fraud Investigative Services at the HMRC. Simon has spent over 27 years at HMRC, where he has held multiple senior leadership roles, including creating new data and intelligence-based approach to presenting risks and threats to the UK tax system. Simon is an expert in tax fraud and organized crime, leading 5,000 criminal justice, tax, asset recovery, cyber accountancy, and AML professionals. He is also a founding member of the Joint Chiefs of Global Tax Enforcement, also known as the J5, and the first director of FIS.
Yeah, it's actually a real honor and a privilege to have Simon with us today. It is a truly impressive resume. And interestingly, I mean, I find the fact that being the first head of the FIS, HMRC's FIS, and what was interesting is sort of like a year ago, Simon was awarded in CBE for services, which sounds really impressive, for services to countering international tax fraud. So I'm really looking forward to this session. We will start by asking Simon a little bit about his background and also some of the recent work that he's been involved in on the tax crime and fraud side. Uh, J5 is a really interesting development, and really about where that move is heading, and also within HMRC what's been happening. And of course, we will ask about some recent developments, tax developments, and then we'll come to my favorite part, the rapid fire round questions.
The illustrious rapid fire round. Well, without further ado, welcome, Simon. We're so happy to have you join us. How's your week been so far?
Well, hi, both of you. I'm delighted to be here with you, actually. No, it's been a good, typically varied week for me. And like you, struggling with the heat early on in the week. But today it's grey and damp, actually, where I am.
Simon is supporting a jumper today. So obviously the weather in his part of the world is much better than what it is in London at the moment. Simon, you've had an illustrious career. And what our listeners might be interested in finding out, what were the key events that have brought you to where you are today?
All right. Well, I started my career in tax following studying law at university. I started my career in tax by qualifying as what we used to call a fully trained tax inspector in the then Inland Revenue. Went on to do some of the jobs that sort of professional typically did at that time. Worked in what is now our large business area with multinational companies, worked in serious fraud investigations, that type of thing. But I'd say for me, there were a couple of sort of key moments that I learned a lot from, and directed a lot of the rest of my career, I'd say. So the first one, I think, was when my first experience of large leadership, and particularly large leadership where I was tasked with creating something new. So this was back in the days of the Inland Revenue, and I became what was called an area director. We were creating these areas from what was previously tax districts. I had to put 6 of those together and create something new. It was about 500 or 600 people, and I really enjoyed that and learned a lot from it, and went on from then actually into a series of larger and larger leadership roles, and for the last 6 years I've been as Ektaa said in the introduction, leading a team of 5,000 people, and I do enjoy that, and I get a lot of sort of satisfaction out of that sort of work. And I guess the other moment was my first move into the sort of enforcement and criminal investigation end of HMRC. So I'd always been interested in investigation, but when I got involved in the intelligence and criminal investigation end of it, I mean, firstly, I loved it. It was great, really exciting, felt really worthwhile and challenging work. But I think I recognised there the potential that we had in the organisation to blend our experience on the criminal investigation side with our sort of deep tax expertise to create something better, really, and more capable. And I've been involved in that sort of enforcement end of things for about a decade now. So I would say those were probably 2 of the key moments, but done loads of different jobs in HMRC.
It's fascinating. And as you say, it's something that's very topical at the moment. Simon, if we rewind the clock and we sort of kind of throw back in time to kind of where it all began, how you sort of started on the tax journey and how you sort of entered that space, what was it about the subject matter, the industry, working with the HMRC that kind of prompted you to start to go down that path? If you were to put yourself back in your sort of 18-year-old shoes or 16-year-old shoes, what was it that kind of interested you about the whole thing?
Well, I think like a lot of people, actually, certainly a lot of people in HMRC, and I suspect in the world of tax generally, you don't set out at 18 or even 21 to be some sort of tax expert or what have you. I sort of joined the civil service was what I was doing at the time, and got posted to the Inland Revenue as was, but pretty quickly got taken by how interesting, how challenging, the breadth of knowledge that you need from a tax perspective. That was something that drew me in. And then after that, just the variety of the work that there is in HMRC, and I might be biased, but I also think HMRC is just a great organisation. It looks after its people, it's competent, and it's doing an important job for the country.
So Simon, FIS is a new unit. What might be interesting is, what was it that gave rise to it, and perhaps what would you do differently?
All right, good question, Ali. I mean, let me take you back to so we created this in 2016, and it was a new unit, but it was built on existing things that we had within the department. It was a world first, actually. Putting together a tax authority's civil investigation and its criminal investigation into one unit. And they'd previously been separate in HMRC, but some of the things we'd experienced, some of the big data leaks that we had around, some Swiss banks and that type of thing, that I think brought home to us the potential benefits and the necessity of working that sort of civil and criminal approach much more closely. And I think we thought by doing this, we could achieve more. What we were doing really was bringing together actually a very mature law enforcement capability. Decades of tackling smuggling and organized crime that HMRC and Customs and Excise had done prior to that, with that sort of deep tax expertise that you need to understand and unravel the most complex financial crime. And I thought that was a real, real potential in that. I had a vision. I wanted this unit to be genuinely world leading. I wanted it to be the top or one of the top tax enforcement teams in the world. And the challenge, I set for the teams, and it became a little bit about a strap line of ours really, was that we wanted no tax fraudster to be beyond our reach. We didn't want we didn't want anything to be too difficult, too big, too complicated for us to be able to tackle. So that was the vision. It was about bringing together the different capabilities we had. Ektaa listed some of the sort of types of skills we've got in the organization at the top of this podcast, bringing together the different sets of powers that we've got, and putting all of that together to enable us to make sort of the maximum impact on tax fraud. So if we look at anything, we look at something that's happening, what set of approaches do we need to make a difference to that? It might be investigation, and we're called Fraud Investigation Service, and probably 80% of what we do is investigation. But we do other things as well. We work with partners. We advise on changing processes. We sort of try and close up vulnerabilities to prevent all fraud happening in the first place.
We've got more questions about tax in a minute, but I've got two questions that I really want to ask you about yourself. First of all, tell me, sort of like with CBE, how did you feel? I mean, did you, of course, you're told about it, but did you see it coming at all?
No, not at all. You don't, do you, with these things? I mean, you just, but actually, when you've been in public service your whole career, it's great. It's lovely recognition. I'm very proud to have been awarded that, and I think, as I said at the time, it's as much about all of those people that I've worked with and all of those teams that I've led over the years that have led that. It's recognition for their work, and it's recognition for the importance of what fraud investigators and others do in HMRC.
How was it on the day?
It was great. It was Windsor Castle, rather than Buckingham Palace, because of sort of COVID restrictions. But it was a lovely event. It was the Princess Royal, Princess Anne. She was very chatty and very informed about tax fraud and economic sort of financial crime and what have you. So it was a super day. Thank you.
Great. I've got one more question, which is, you've done tax for a very long time. You've been going through HMRC. Would you consider doing something differently? Maybe outside, perhaps politics?
No, you won't see me going into politics. Absolutely, definitely not. I would never rule out doing something different. I say I've had a great career in HMRC and very much value the contribution I've been able to make. But we work alongside, and more alongside a much broader community. I think this is not just HMRC's job. We partner with whether it's financial institutions, whether it's other tax professionals or legal firms, or whether it's international partners. And there is a big sort of alliance out there, if you like, that's working together to try to prevent tax fraud and tax crime. It's not just the tax authority's job, and a lot of those people do really valuable work. And if there's anything I can do to help those sort of organizations or communities in the future, then that might be something that would attract me.
So parallel force. I mean, so we won't be seeing you in the nomination for the next leadership. One of the candidates popping up.
I very rarely give definite answers, but on that, definite.
Well, I was hoping for a tax files exclusive there, Simon. Well, I mean, like you said, it's much bigger than just, I guess, the world of the HMRC, right? There's so many allies and allegiances that you have alongside. Whether that might be, as you say, the law firms, the partnership, kind of that whole cohort of individuals that sort of work together almost as super force to kind of really clamp down on a lot of the issues around fraud and kind of criminal investigations around this stuff. It's really interesting, actually, how kind of your line of work is developed in kind of taking you down that tax crime and fraud path to sort of really put together a bit more of a robust structure around it. How has your role changed with the current landscape? Tax, we're seeing more and more being thrust into the kind of central light around, whether it be reputational risk from a company point of view, ESG is all of a sudden roped into kind of the larger tax conversation. Having been in the HMRC for so many years and occupying so many different hats as you've got through your career, what has been the biggest development for you coming into sort of 2022 now, post a COVID landscape, to really start to cut down on these things when, the resources for some of these companies are just limitless, right? You've got everything at the disposal of your iPhone or kind of internet and all these sort of elaborate structures. How do you develop yourself to keep yourself current with what's happening in the current landscape?
Yeah, it's two or three big things I think I'd highlight. One, I think tax has always been sort of newsworthy to a degree, but I think post financial crisis, actually, and onwards, it's become much more of a public interest issue, and that definitely affected our work. I think in a positive way. Actually, government provided resources for us. There was I think a sense of renewed public support for the role that we had in levelling the playing field. The majority of UK citizens pay the tax they're supposed to pay, and we say ourselves very much on their side in sort of levelling that playing field. You mentioned ESG, and I think corporations are taking taxation responsibilities increasingly seriously. You'll be aware of the corporate criminal offence that came in 2017, and we've seen that and other things. The impact of that has been that I think companies have taken that whole side of things, that corporate responsibility for preventing others commit tax evasion, much more seriously. So that's been a big development. But in terms of tax fraud itself, so it's much more technologically and digitally enabled now. It's increasingly international. It's increasingly sophisticated. And because of all that, we see the tax fraudsters that we're dealing with increasingly needing to use third parties or enablers, as we might call them. So that's been a really big development, and that's what takes quite a lot of our attention, if you like. How do we respond to that? How do we make sure we're able to tackle that increasingly international and sophisticated sort of crime? When I say sophisticated, I mean, the sort of things we're dealing with. So at one end of the spectrum, it's sort of global organized crime groups controlling the international trade in illicit cigarettes. It might be small groups of professionals, sometimes based offshore, creating complex schemes to evade tax, or it's the super wealthy hiding the money offshore. All of that's really challenging. It's all increasingly sophisticated, increasingly, as I say, technically, digitally, and professionally supported.
I was just going to ask, one of the things that's really interesting is I was on HMRC's website and looking at the kind of people they're recruiting. And it's definitely a trend towards getting tax technologists, people with the data or technology background. Do you think it's shifting from the sort of like traditional role of tax advisors who, for a better word, were, it was an art and it's now giving way to a science?
It's both. The balance has changed. Yes, the balance. If I go back to the early days as a tax inspector, you worked primarily on your own, looking at sets of accounts and tax computations and investigating things on your own. That's not the way it's done in the main now. A lot of the work we do is very much supported by very sophisticated data analytics, a huge amounts of data upon which to work, and even in my area, I say the balance between specialists. So it might be specialists in digital forensics, for example. So people who, when we seize mobile phones or laptops in search and arrest operations, so the specialists who can get inside those and find what's what's inside them. There's those sorts of, we have cybercrime specialists, forensic accountants, insolvency experts. So there has been a real change in the balance, I would say. But we still need tax professionals. We still need investigators. We still need all of those and lots of them. But yes, the balance has changed and a much more of a blend of specialists now as well.
It's amazing, isn't it? The landscape is just so broad around sort of anything, as you say, cyber and kind of the different holes where people can utilize sort of tools that are out there to sort of get around the tax agenda and kind of obviously partake in some of this fraud. We mentioned things changing at the speed of light. I'm really interested to hear kind of how crypto fraud is I guess, sort of impacting at the moment. Is that something that is starting to be on the agenda point and is sort of fully fledged in terms of having a process around it at the moment? Or is this a new kind of landscape, almost like the wild west around sort of a new skill set of individuals that are needing to come in to battle that?
Yeah, it's certainly something that is changing the landscape, Ektaa. So, I mean, firstly, I think the first thing to say really is I mean, the UK government really sort of supports these new technologies, really keen to make the UK a great place to do business in relation to some of this sort of new digital technology. And HMRC is really keen to support that and get great guidance out there for, to feel like, how does the tax work when you're dealing with cryptocurrencies, for example. And like with everything, the majority of people do everything they should do. However, the very nature of a cryptocurrency means that it is, tempting for criminals or fraudsters to use it because of its sort of semi-anonymous nature. So we see it increasingly used in really quite complex money laundering schemes, and people trying to disguise the proceeds of. But yeah, it's an increasing feature of what we do. So absolutely, we have to train our people. You mentioned earlier, actually, the J5, and I don't know whether you want to come on to that in a little bit, but one thing we've done with that group is we've run a series of what we call crypto challenges. The latest of which was in London a couple of months ago. And what we're doing there is getting experts in crypto, experts in digital investigation, lots of data, lots of intelligence and private sector support from all 5 countries, stick them in a room, not quite lock them in a room, but stick them in a room for 5 days and say, right, there you go. And they do come out with some great stuff and some really solid sort of leads and the beginnings of investigations out there. So again, it's all about partnering with people, getting the right skills together, getting the right data together. So yes, increasingly a feature of what we do.
Great. So I guess as far as the process goes then, what is it like when an organization is being investigated by the HMRC for potential tax fraud or crime? What is the process that you sort of go through to get to that point?
Oh, so I mean, there probably isn't a single process, Ektaa. It depends on what we're trying to achieve. I think key to what we try to do is a proportionate approach to what we're seeing. So if this is an individual and it's relatively small scale stuff, we'll deal with that in a really proportionate way with usually a typical tax inquiry, self-assessment inquiry, whatever, that you'll be very familiar with. Other end of the spectrum, if we're dealing with an international global, an international organized crime group, you'll appreciate that might be very different. We might have a significant period of covert investigation involving surveillance and intercept and all sorts of things before we end up perhaps coordinating a series of arrests and searches across the country and sometimes across the world, sometimes involving hundreds of our officers on a single day to execute that. So the whole raft of different types of approaches we might take depending on what the situation is.
That's great, Simon. I had some questions about the J5. I mean, it's probably quite an interesting development because you've got different cross-cultural challenges, you've got different styles, different enforcement approaches. say the US or Italian sort of like tax police obviously are armed and so on. Do you see us sort of like moving towards a more, didactic hardline approach, or do you see that they will move towards us?
Uh, so it's not really about that, Ali. We do learn from each other, and one of the some of the power of the J5 is that again, if we're dealing with an international issue, we can bring together our different capabilities and our different approaches, and one agency might be able to do something that another can't, and we'll do that. And we'll share data, we'll share intelligence, we'll share skills, and all that stuff. So we do that, but it's not necessarily about moving to any different sort of approach. It's really sort of the power of five, if you like, bringing together all of that. We're dealing with networks of criminals, and so this is creating a network of tax enforcement authorities to sort of match up to that, and a global response really to a global problem. I think that's the way we see it. But it's been a really interesting experience. You're right. Languages issues. There's time zones. There's different powers, different laws in each country. So lots of things to work through and to get through. But I've been so encouraged by how it's gone, and a lot of that is that just the how seriously how determined everybody has been to make this work. One stat that always stands out for me is that in the first year, we exchanged as much intelligence as we had done in the previous 10. And that's not any change of law or change of particular process. It's just that we're working together. The will is there, the determination is there to do it. But 4 years on from when we created this organization, it's really now a very mature organization. So I think we're increasingly acting as a sort of the voice of global tax enforcement. We recently started talking to the world's biggest banks about how we can collectively do something to prevent tax fraud. But some of our operational work is really maturing. I don't know whether you caught up with what we call Operational Atlantis a few weeks ago. So this was one of our very first operations, and certainly the first one that we've gone, been able to go sort of public with, if you like. So this was at the center of this was a Puerto Rican bank. Now, Puerto Rico is significant because it sits outside of all the automatic exchange of information rules. It's not in CRS. It's a US territory, but FATCA isn't applied to it either. And this bank was, selling products that were enabling people to evade tax. So we were very interested in this bank. So the five of us were working together. We had a global day of action a couple of years ago. Lots of subpoenas, arrests, information notices, whatever. And then alongside us, the Puerto Rican regulators started to get interested, and they carried out their own investigation. And what happened a couple of months ago was that regulator essentially deregistered this bank. So that bank is now out of action. A bank that we suspected of facilitating tax evasion and money laundering. So that's a huge result, I think, in that sense. And then in terms of UK customers that are using that, we think there are hundreds of UK customers who are using those products, and we've already got a series of tax inquiries and criminal investigations open there as well, and more to come. So that's, I think, a good example of something I don't think would have happened if the J5 didn't exist. We wouldn't have had the ability to do that without the combined efforts of the five.
Yeah, I mean, just on that, it was obviously sort of like a real turning point, if I can say, in enforcement action by taxation authorities where they act in concert. Are we likely to see more days of action, so to speak, if you find evidence of similar type of behaviors?
Yeah, definitely. We have, we have a number of live investigations, coordinated across the group, or live intelligence operations currently. which we review regularly. It's quite a portfolio there. Obviously, most of those aren't publicly known about yet, but absolutely, Ali, you will see more of this nature.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing that, listeners will be very interested in, is that direction of travel for the J5 and for FIS going forward. I mean, sort of like things are getting a lot more serious and you are ready to use your powers.
No, definitely. And I think, as I said at the beginning, that sort of vision I set for the organization about, nobody beyond our reach. And I think some of the things that we've seen that you've seen in the public domain over the last few months, I hope demonstrate that. The extradition of Sarah Panitska, the UK's most wanted female tax criminal on the run for 9 years, the prosecution of Dominic Chappelle, the recent charges against Bernie Ecclestone, Operation Atlantis I've just mentioned. We are. This is us trying to ensure that nothing is too complex, nothing is too big, nothing is too difficult to tackle.
Exactly. And I guess there's so much behind you, as you mentioned, some real big sort of figureheads and topical issues, as you say, in the news at the moment. What does the future hold in regards to tax crime and tax fraud for you? I mean, the methodology, the kind of almost the kind of figure of making sure that nobody is out of scope, right? No one is too big or too small to kind of evade this sort of thing. What do you see the future bringing coming out of the back of what arguably is a difficult economic time for people living in Britain and globally, kind of off the back of the pandemic? How do you see this developing in the next couple of years?
I mean, I guess what I hope is that what we're doing is combating and successfully combating the harm of tax fraud. And that harm, I think, Ektaa, comes in a number of different forms. At its most straightforward, it's money that should be paid to fund the UK's public services. So we think we lose between 10, 15 billion pounds a year to sort of tax fraud. So that's an awful lot of money that could do an awful lot of good. So, I absolutely, hope that we continue to prevent the loss of a lot of that or recover a lot of that. But it's not just about the money. It does bring real harm to individuals. We see people who've been exploited by dishonest professionals, perhaps, and they lose their pension contributions or national insurance contributions or whatever it might be. We see people being exploited by organized crime groups. We perhaps see people subject to unfair competition because others are evading the tax or they're selling illicit product or something like that. So there's real harm happens to real individuals. So preventing that. And I think even possibly even more fundamentally, it's about fairness and it's about justice. Tax fraud can, erode that sort of real fundamental trust between the tax authority, tax administration, and the public. So we want to play our part in reassuring the public, as I say, that we think of ourselves as on the side of the public and making sure there is this level playing field, that those harms don't happen, that we collect the right money to fund the UK's public services. So I want just more of that, Ektaa, really, and that we can get more and more successful at that, and as new methods of evading tax emerge, as they always do. I mean, it's difficult stuff. This, it's by nature, it's hidden, it's dishonest. So it's very challenging to deal with. That we stay up to the pace of that, if you like, and that we don't let any of that get away from us.
Yeah.
Could I just ask specifically about yourself and some of the work that we've seen, Simon, from your areas? We've seen a real outreach and a greater level of participation by HMRC. You're in the thick of it. I mean, is there a changing culture or change in approach, a greater transparency that we can expect?
I think there is. So certainly personally, Ali, I strongly believe in being as transparent as possible with all this. Hence why I'm, on this podcast talking, as freely as I can. You might have seen me posting regularly on LinkedIn about some of the stuff we do and engaging with people on that. So I try to be as transparent as possible, because I think there's a significant public interest in that. But it's also quite hard nosed in terms of reaching out to those people who it's important to partner with to tackle tax crime. So we've got something we call our Tax Crime Alliance that we've set up over the last year. So this involves the big accountancy firms, the big law firms, and others. We work very closely with the UK and overseas financial institutions. They can really help, stop tax fraud or prevent tax losses. If we share with them what we're seeing, we share the sort of MOs we're seeing from crime groups, which enables them to spot suspicious transactions and stop money flows. I mean, we had one it was actually one of the COVID scheme frauds, and we were able to stop £26 million before it probably left the UK. So working alongside professionals and financial institutions has really tangible benefits in preventing or detecting tax crime.
Yeah, I personally can say that I'm on one of those working groups to do with how you outreach to professional advisors. And I've personally seen a real change in approach. So thank you for that, Simon, because I think it makes for better enforcement, both the taxpayer and the tax authorities. That collaboration is really effective. So yeah, I can vouch for it. Ektaa, I know you had another question before we move to my favorite part.
Yeah. It's just, I think there's this constant debate ongoing around the globalization of the tax system, whether, things be in a bit more of an orderly fashion, if the kind of everybody was singing from the same hymn sheets globally on this sort of thing. Do you think that the kind of lack of globalization in the tax system provides a bit of a hindrance for the agenda point that obviously you're kind of out there and pushing at the moment? Or do you think there is a way of kind of everybody working in harmony around the subject matter?
So different tax systems, different tax approaches certainly provides opportunities for tax fraudsters or just to play the rules off against one jurisdiction or another, or moving goods or value across borders to enable to hide things. So absolutely, I think it would be impossible to harmonize everything in every way, because it's not just all about tax systems, it's about lots more as well. So that's definitely something that the fraudsters try to exploit, and that's why partnerships like the J5 are so important, so that we can move as freely across jurisdictional boundaries as the criminals. Otherwise, we're always going to play catch up.
Absolutely.
Great. So thank you very much, Simon. Before we move ahead to our rapid fire round, I just wanted to recap what we have covered today. So after introducing you, we talked a little bit about your background, discussed the work on the J5 and the new approaches and processes at HMRC, and the broader societal sort of like responsibilities that you talked about. And just now we did a little bit of future gazing of what future enforcement may look like, the concerted enforcement on a cross-border basis.
Now, Simon, are you ready for what is officially our favorite part of the Tax Files podcast, the illustrious rapid fire round?
Go on then.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get to know you a bit more as a person, Simon. So if you are ready, shall we kick off with the rapid fire?
Happy to. Go ahead.
Let's go. Man City or Man United?
Absolutely neither. I'm a lifelong and passionate Newcastle United supporter.
Oh. Cats or dogs, Simon?
Dogs, but don't tell my cat that. I have one of it.
Who is your favorite band?
My favorite band. So I spent most of my youth and through into my 20s playing the trumpet in big bands and jazz orchestras and that sort of thing. So I'm going to go for the Duke Ellington Band.
Coffee or tea?
Or tea. I drink buckets full of tea every day.
City or countryside?
Both actually, because I sort of, I guess I live in the countryside, but work an awful lot, as you'd expect in London. So enjoy both. Enjoy the benefits of both. Sorry, that's not me. I shouldn't answer that. Like, a quick fire.
Well, the best of both worlds. Train or aeroplane?
Airplane. I love a bit of travel. I love to get away, and it's exciting to fly around the globe like Ali.
Where is your next travel destination?
I think it's likely to be New York.
The Big Apple, Paul Rib.
Mm.
Food heaven for you.
Oh, I enjoy all sorts of food, but a nice plate of oysters, I would say.
Oof. Can it get any better? Fiction or non-fiction?
Fiction. Love a bit of John le Carré.
No. Art museum or history museum?
Art museum.
And lastly, vacation or staycation?
Vacation. As I say, I love to get around the world.
Nice. You survived it, Simon. Well done.
So, Simon, you mentioned books along the way. Is there a book, both fiction or non-fiction, that really has sparked your interest? The last book that really captured you?
So I'll go sort of semi linked to the job. So I really enjoyed Oliver Bullow's book, Moneyland. I know he's got another one out recently, which I've not read yet, Butler to the World. But Oliver is a fantastic storyteller around sort of money laundering and financial crime, and he makes it very engaging and very simple, but just some great stories, but also just really interesting. So if you've not read that, I'd highly recommend that.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting. You get these police dramas, crime stuff and when you talk to the police, they say, it's nothing like that. I mean, who knows? There may be a fictional series made about your unit soon.
Who knows, Ali? There might just be.
Simon, who would you want to play you in the series that you got your unit?
I'll leave others to judge that. I'm not going to get drawn into that.
Hugh Grant, I think.
I think Hugh Grant. That's a good one.
I'll take Hugh Grant.
Yeah, we'll have him on the podcast next. Someone ask it for you. Don't worry.
I think we should reach out and let Hugh know.
Yeah, here if you're listening to the tax files, we've got your next piece of work lined up. Well, Simon, it's been amazing speaking to you. What piece of information or advice would you like to leave our audience with?
I think I'd like people to understand that HMRC are on your side. We are determined to crack down on those who are dishonestly abusing the tax system, and we very much have the capability to do so.
Simon is watching, everybody. Well, thank you for listening to the Tax Files. It's been a pleasure having you join us. Please subscribe and get in contact if you wish to discuss any of these topics with us or our team, or if you have any questions at all. We'll catch you here again at the same time next month with the most esteemed guest. To stay up to date with announcements, updates, and guest reveals, please follow Hansook on LinkedIn.
Thank you very much. Big thank you to Simon and Ektaa. Good luck with the wedding. Not your own wedding.
Just to clarify, everybody.
Yeah, it's Italy, isn't it? You're off to.
It is, yeah. So I'm off to Tuscany, actually, sunny Tuscany tomorrow to welter in 45 degrees heat on the Chianti Hills. So looking forward to lots of wine and lots of pasta by the buckets, actually. So cannot wait. Have any of you been to Tuscany before?
No, it's one of my bucket list items.
Yeah, I've been to Tuscany a couple of times. Actually, it's beautiful, beautiful.
Very, very excited about it. So we're staying at Chianti. So I look forward to lots of culture, but mostly lots of Chianti wine, which I will not lie about.
Fantastic. Well, have a great time. And finally, just want to thank our listeners and hope to speak to you again. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Goodbye.